Any sailor will tell you that there's something special about arriving in a safe haven after a tough voyage, and I don't mind telling you that the Pentland Firth was awful. But it made the peace of Arable all the more wonderful on that long northern hemisphere day. The boat nestled in the perfect shelter of the Tombolo, double-sided beach that joins the almost island of Ardniki to the mainland. The come down from fear is a slowing down. You take the time to savour things that float gently past the boat. Arable is a mile wide, 12 miles long, and at 180 feet is the deepest sea loch on mainland Britain. At one time there was a thriving community up here. It was a society built around townships of 3 or 4 families living and working as one. Maybe 20 people sharing a hearth and a barn, the field work and the herding. Cattle, horses, goats, pigs, roots, and a few oats as well as fish in season. The people were apparently happy and well fed. A good life. They were mostly Catholics. Lots of great music, poetry, dancing, alcohol and folklore. The land was, they thought, owned collectively by the clans. As a result, they paid almost bugger all rent for it, but might be called up to send their young men off to fight for the clan occasionally. Water makes communication fast and efficient, and boats of all sizes plied these waters, not just fishing, but trading as well. These people knew about and traded with the outside world. They were far from the ignorant peasants portrayed in the literature. The remains of lime kilns, essential for building proper weatherproof houses, barns, churches and castles, are on 2 of the islands of Arable. Then came the clearances, and thousands of clansmen and their families were displaced by sheep. In less than a generation, a 500-year-old culture, rich in religion, music, poetry and stories, was destroyed and thrown to the 4 corners of the earth. The clansmen were utterly betrayed by an unholy alliance of their own chiefs and greedy land-grabbing wool magnates from the Scottish lowlands. During the Second World War, Arable was stuffed with ships. It was an ideal place to assemble the Arctic convoys, which took supplies of weapons and boots to the Russians, who were giving Hitler a bit of a kicking in bloody freezing Leningrad and thereabouts. Keeping Hitler distracted was essential to give time for the Yanks to start mass-producing the 3 weapons of war that counted for anything: long-range bombers, Sherman tanks and Liberty ships. Everything else was frippery and service gear. The Germans tried to stop the convoys with their own long-range bombers and scores of submarines working out of Norwegian bases. One convoy of 35 ships lost all but 11 of them. But the Brits, Canadians and later on the Yanks realised that a convoy stood the best chance of getting through if it headed out in the crappiest weather a really terrible place can dish up. In the winter, the seawater is almost frozen. It turns greasy with cold and every drop of spray that hits the decks freezes within seconds and threatens the stability of a heavily laden, slow-moving ship. Hand-chipping ice from overburdened decks was a daily job. Arable was the last bit of Britain many of these astonishingly brave and hard seamen ever saw. They hated Arable and called it Loch Horrible. Lots of amazing films about the Arctic convoys on the web. Links on my website. We owe these men a massive debt. Today, the almost relentless tranquility of Arable is only occasionally punctured by traffic on the A838 coastal road that runs right around the top of Britain. It swoops and turns across the landscape with intriguing bends, hills and vistas that open up ahead of the drivers. It has become one of the world's iconic biker routes, so every now and again the peace of Loch Arable is shattered by leather-clad middle management born-again bikers working on their bucket list and bonding with their equally well-paid, yet somehow unsatisfied mates and generally getting in touch with their adrenaline. For us though, Loch Arable was a splendid place to unwind after a stressful time, so we spent the day drifting around. Tin can. All plastic fisherman's crap in here. Blue fisherman's crap. Probably fisherman's crap. Fisherman's crap. Fish farm crap. Fisherman's crap. Well, maybe it's fish farm stuff, I don't know. Fisherman's crap. More of this. Binding material. Lasts for ages. Fisherman's crap. The following morning I awoke disgustingly early and took her out of Arable and into the fast-moving tides of the Penton Firth. leaving Loch Arable, come around the rocks, and we've got to get around this Barade head and then to Cape Roth. So as we come out here we should pick up the tidal stream. Although I'm a bit worried because last night there was a Norwegian man in the loch and he left about the same time as us and he was heading the other way. So whether he's prepared to plug the tide for a while, I don't know. The other thing is that the weatherman said the wind was going to be in the south and the east, and it's in the west. Gentle breeze though. Nice clouds, the sunshine. .9 knots, so I'm sure we are starting to pick up the tidal flow. These are the highest cliffs on the UK mainland, 922 feet, 3 times the height of the chronically over-eulogised White Cliffs of Dover, which by now are about 700 miles to the south of us. So this is the long-awaited Cape Roth. Thought about this a lot, and just to add a bit of excitement to an already intimidating place, look at this. There are these 2 rocks here, Durs Lip rocks, just off the tip, just to make the place a little bit more stressful to get around. But I have to say today is being a rather dull pussycat. At Cape Roth there's an inner and an outer passage. The outer one is safer. The inner one is slightly riskier but more fun and takes you closer to that amazing headland. The name Cape Roth is not quite as it seems. Cape Anger would be a good name for the place because the weather here is ferocious. It gets shed loads of wind and massive seas that come rolling off the Atlantic driven by the relentless westerlies. These big waves meet the 8-knot tides pouring out of the Pentland Firth, making a rough place even tougher. Add to this, it holds the record for the gloomiest January on record in the UK. 38 measly, watery, pathetic minutes of sunshine in one whole month. Sadly, the name Rath, or Roth, is nothing to do with anger or upset. It's derived from the Norse and means turning point. To the virtuoso Viking navigators, it was little more than a road sign, proving that the truth can sometimes be rather dull. Despite the disappointing etymology, the combination of big waves, strong currents, strong winds and frequent bogs, Cape Roth is an easy place to get lost and then get into trouble and end up being smashed into a really impressive, nasty lee shore. But of course us modern sailors have GPS, so we're never lost, and we have engines, so we can nearly always get out of trouble. We are certainly the luckiest sailors ever to have existed. So this is my last tack around Cape Roth. I'm on the last. I'm just fetching it. I'm going the inner passage between here and the Skerry. And I have thought about this place for months, years I've thought about this place. It's Hill Corner. It's a frightening place, the name alone, and it did frighten me the other night. Not this place, but this stretch of coast. And well, broken the back of the journey. And like lots of things that you've waited for ages, it's just a bit of a disappointment really. It's a bit of an ennui. Yeah, okay, I've done it. It's not a great day. The wind is on the nose. The Cape Wrath is just peaceful and quiet, being a bit of a pussycat. There's not much of a tide running, maybe 2 knots, not much. I'm going to go around the corner and have a glass of whiskey. Ha ha! Cape Wrath. We passed Sandwood Bay, which is widely regarded as the finest mile-long beach in Britain, and is at the end of a 4-mile walk from the nearest road, so you can usually have it all to yourself. Planning to come back here? As we came south, the weather started to improve, and by the time we entered Loch Inchard, just 15 miles south of Cape Wrath, it got positively hot. And we came across the thickest jelly blob swarm either of us have ever seen. Too dense to risk turning the engine on for fear of blocking the intakes. But the loch and the surrounding countryside looked wonderful. On a day like this, you can see why the Mackays and the Morrisons wanted to stay here and tried their best to resist the depredations of the money-hungry lowland Scottish sheep magnates and the greedy bastard clan chiefs. Up here in Sutherland, it was their own hereditary clan chief, the treacherous Lady Sutherland, married, as it happened, to the richest man in England, who turfed them out of their mountains, glens and lochs, and then herded them into the tiny windswept plots of stony land in coastal villages, or dispatched them overseas, mostly to Newfoundland and Australia. All in the name of progress, of course, and massive profits for the despicable clan chiefs and their lick-spittle lowland Scottish lapdogs. But echoes of the culture that was born here can be heard in the musical traditions of the Canadian and American coasts. Just imagine what magnificent cultural treasures were lost when these people were dispersed. A sad chapter in the history of a great nation. absolutely mad. The biggest folly is of all the stupid things people do, rape, kill each other, warfare, run two-stroke outboards, dredging is the most stupid thing of all. Unbelievable. It's not making a living, it's desecration, absolute desecration. But look at the weight of the gear that they use now. That's not sustainable.
Okay, this is fishermen. Right, this is where they've been repairing their nets. And they just cut it, dump it. Cut it, dump it. Cut it, dump it. And all this stuff is also going to wind up being cut up and dumped as it wears out.
We motored out of Loch Inchard, hoping to make the most of the south-going stream. The aim was to ride the tide and what meagre amounts of wind there were to drift down the coast to Handa, just one of the many island jewels the west coast has to offer. I love having a reliable and relatively quiet inboard. What a wonderful thing it is when you turn it off and let the quietly insistent forces of nature take a hand. Then something happens inside a man and the world feels like a better balanced place, more relaxed, less troublesome. We drifted past some amazing geography that day. Loch Laxford, with its uber-statuesque narrow lamprints, went past unexplored. At the time I was expecting to return here with a boat, a dinghy and a camera. Looking slightly less likely now though, lads. We shall see. Details on the website. Then down to Handa and the anchorage of a lifetime. Yes, this is Scotland. There are times when you can't believe life can get any better. Handa is little more than a mile square and was once home to 12 families. They lived off fish, birds' eggs, dairy products and vegetables. So many of the menfolk died falling off cliff faces and drowning in terrible boats that it was the women who provided the cultural continuity. The islanders held a meeting every morning and the head woman, usually the oldest, allocated the work. Then came potato blight, which was hotly followed by lowland sheepmen, and by 1845 the islanders had all left for Canada, leaving just the sheep. But what a place! What a homeland! So beautiful that leaving it would certainly break your heart.